Welcome to Spin Out.
I'm Dave,
And I'm Winner.
and we're here to demystify venture
Minimize FOMO.
and discuss the relationships between GPs and LPs.
So thanks for joining today. Last episode, we talked about AGMs, annual general meetings, which are meetings that usually happen once a year, put on by VCs, put on by general partners. We talked about what they are and the different types of annual meetings. Continuing the conversation today, we've gotten some feedback. We're going to talk about greatest hits. So we're going to introduce another framework to think about, like how can you shine above and beyond? And we're going to talk about examples because Dave and I have both attended probably combined hundreds of annual meetings over the last decade and a half. And so we'll give you some things that work, maybe some things to think about that maybe won't work. And hopefully you can take away a few nuggets to improve on your own annual meetings.
I think one of the key themes that we're going to be talking about is putting ourselves in the shoes of the attendees of these annual meetings and what will bring them out and what will make it an exciting event, an informative event, and one that they'll want to put on their calendar for next year. And so that is ultimately what we're going to try to do, is put ourselves in the shoes of the people that are attending your AGM. And we're going to think through it in kind of a three-part model. We love these frameworks. But what we're really going to be thinking about is the people that come to these meetings. How do we answer the needs that they have? We're going to be thinking about the business and industry that we're investing in. And the ultimate goal of the fund is to generate commercial activity, compound value over time, and exit these companies. So what can we do to help use this event to kickstart that activity for our companies and bring our LPs into it? And then lastly, so people, business, and investments. A lot of LPs come to annual meetings because they want to hear how the portfolio is doing, how the fund's progressing, what's next in your ultimate growth plan for the business. And so there are reasons for people to want to come and learn this information. So we'll be talking about what an amazing AGM is through the lens of people, business, and investments.
What do your attendees want? What are their motivations? They want to interact with relevant people, right? Like a lot of people have to travel far and wide to attend an annual meeting. So they want to interact with relevant people in their industry, in your portfolio, that are tied to a certain theme, right? There's reasons why LPs invested into your fund. I'm sure it's because they like you a lot, but it might also be because like they're really interested, right, in an industry or a theme, and they kind of want to go to your event because you're convening all these like really, really, relevant people. So that's the people part in the triangle. Then it's like, the business part is like, can you structure the event in a way that allows them to like engage and, effectively do business on the back of that intentional networking. So that's the business part in the triangle. And lastly, we talked about it on the last episode, but you've spent weeks preparing for this event. You're conveying all this information, all this data. So, are you able to generate additional investment? That could be follow-on investment into one of your portfolio companies. That could be your fundraising for your next fund, right? So that's the investment piece in the triangle. So as Dave introduced, people, business, investment, we're trying to now we're going to elucidate on ideas and just like stories on like how stuff fits in and how you can do things to kind of stand out and go above and beyond.
One of the annual meetings that I go to kind of every year and have for the last few years, one thing they do really well is they hire or bring in a keynote speaker. And that keynote speaker sometimes is kept secret because of who the individuals are, but it's always a draw, and it gets a lot of the corporate LPs out. It gets the people that work at our LPs to want to come and listen to the guest speaker. So some of the ones we've had in the past are like famous, like Hall of Fame basketball players or football players. They'll get up, they might even be investors in the fund. And that's always nice when they can show that they're connected to the network or connected to the fund. So it's great when you can have like a celebrity athlete come and do a fireside chat with the GP, explain, how they have built their teams in the past and how maybe the firm or the franchise now is using some of those lessons. So I've been to a number of these, but it's always really exciting when you get to, go up and shake the hand of a Hall of Fame sports star. And so I've done that a couple of times at annual meetings, and I always remember those. And it's always something I look forward to when I hear or see the next invite to that firm's annual meeting.
I might differ a little bit here, where I think for me
Please.
as an LP, I do like meeting people who've been, very accomplished in their respective fields. But, as an LP, like I'm also showing up for, portfolio monitoring and, understanding, how are my dollars being spent? How are they being invested? And understanding kind of where are we going from here?
I think that's a critical point. I mean, we aren't jokingly, we're not just bringing in the most famous person you can hire on Cameo. It does need to be, if you're bringing in a famous investor or famous athlete, it does need to be connected somehow to the portfolio. It's great if they're, a customer already of one of the portfolio companies. Like there's all different ways that those types of people can be connected. But I do take your point that it's not just, a nice headline thing. You want it to be meaningful to the business overall. So I do agree with you there. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I'll give an example. Like, I went to this a while ago, but a private equity annual meeting, and they invited a very famous author who wrote a book about an economic downturn, and the economy was facing, the U.S. economy was facing like an impending economic downturn. So it
Yeah.
was a very like that person wasn't an investor in the fund yet. They were kind of brought in to kind of talk about these market dynamics. So it's like very relevant, very interesting. It didn't have to do with the portfolio, but it was like a very compelling person. It was very impressive that they were there, right? Being kind of like a best-selling author. And this was the most topical book, right? So like you can bring in someone that isn't directly connected to the portfolio and can still be very relevant. So, and very exciting for, to get people to show up. And yeah, I think it's up to you whether you disclose who that person is. Sometimes contractually you can't. But if you can, right, it's a carrot to kind of get people to again travel far and wide.
You're trying to like curate this awesome experience as well. Cause you're right to the point of people traveling far and wide, they have to leave their lives, disrupt their routines, leave their significant others and children at home and come to your event. They might have to get on a plane, stay in hotels. So it's what kind of a room, what kind of an event can you curate to make this a meaningful experience for them so that it is worthwhile for them to come year after year?
Another way to think about putting people on stage, right, and going kind of above and beyond is like just demonstrating access to relevant people. So the example I just gave on like the author, again, you can kind of pay for that person to show up. So it really doesn't show like access. Sometimes it's also interesting to like bring in industry people. If you're a specialized fund, right? If you're an industry insider to kind of demonstrate that, like use the annual meeting to your advantage, use the people you're going to kind of put front and center to your advantage to show like, hey, like I'm actually able to have good relevant people show up. And that, that in and of itself is kind of an indicator of your social capital and your social standing. So if I'm an LP and I'm showing up and I'm seeing you're able to bring all these, influential people on stage to talk kindly about you, to engage with your portfolio, to engage with us as the LPs and attendees, like that's a powerful statement.
Well, let me bridge that into the next component, like the business and industry, because I think a lot of people come to AGMs. One, they want to meet the people in the room, like we just said, but there could be business opportunities, especially if you're a sector or industry focused fund. A lot of your LPs may want to purchase the software tools or products that your portfolio companies are building. And so I've been to an annual meeting where what they did is they invited founders, and the host of the firm GP also hosts a podcast that's specific to the industry. And so they invited a lot of the guests from the podcast to come to the annual meeting. And now some of those people aren't necessarily LPs. They're not investing in venture capital companies, but they are buying software at their businesses. They are sitting in strategy meetings at the executive level. They are potential points of contact and champions for some of your early stage CEOs at these larger organizations. And so I think there's a great way to bring the people in, connect it to the business and industry, and figure out a way to help your CEOs meet people that they might not have otherwise had an opportunity to meet, just because life is busy. But you can create that kind of network opportunity at your AGM.
Yeah, I think the key point here is intentional networking. Like, can you create
Mm.
these intentional networking moments? Um, if you do a lot of events, I feel like it always comes down to this. So, two examples, like two stories. Like one, um, there was a construction tech fund, right? Specialized fund. A lot of their LPs were actually corporates that weren't yet
Mm.
connected to the portfolio. One of the reasons they invested into the fund in the first place was right to kind of stay top, like on top of what was happening in the industry, and to potentially connect to founders. But right there wasn't that opportunity. Like they're able to read the quarterly letter, but they're not able to like shake hands and kind of meet with portfolio founders. So the annual meeting happened. listen to our last pod, kind of understand like, how you can kind of agenda wise set up an annual meeting. But then what they did above and beyond was like they just had a half day. It was a retreat annual meeting. So it was a really nice location. And they did a half day to just like create an intentional networking scenario where the founders presented on themes and topics that were super relevant, super, next generation. And the industry folks, like the LPs, were very compelled, right? They were hearing about the latest and greatest in that technology arena in the construction tech world. I think that went very well and actually drove a lot of business for the portfolio companies and hopefully a lot of results for the corporate. So if you understand your LP base and kind of who they are and what they want, again, sometimes you'll even have, in the beginning, like that conversation. But even if you haven't had that conversation, even if it's not contractual yet, setting up an annual meeting, again, it's a great time to think about these intentional networking scenarios that can actually lead to results, right? And more business for your portfolio means more, value for your LPs. So that's a really, really easy one. Another one was a healthcare fund. So in this case, like we were LPs in a life sciences fund. They became known for actually doing a mini conference. This was separate from the annual meeting, but they eventually tacked it on to the annual meeting where again, it was healthcare giants trying to understand the latest and greatest in life sciences. And so it was just kind of its own independent thing. And they realized it was becoming more and more part of their brand. So they tacked it on the annual meeting. So it's just easier for LPs to kind of show up and stay 2 days or 3 days instead of one day, and get a lot of kind of business value. Again, not only out of investing into the fund, but also engaging with their ecosystem, with their portfolio funds. And one more example on the like product side. So there was a VC fund, again, specialized. Their network was specifically like product managers and people that were very focused on developing products. So all things around product, strategy, design, marketing.
Uh-huh.
So they knew what they stood for. They knew their brand and they did their annual meeting. And then they kind of did like this, parallel event, same time, broke it down into like these constituent parts and brought together probably 50 or 100 of the top product people in venture to kind of have these discussions, at a very like granular, practical level. And
Mm.
again, the NPS there, the feedback there was like very, very positive because you're putting the right people in the right room. You understand what your brand is and you understand like the connections you need to make, right? It was very authentic to their brand. So understanding who you are, what you're bringing to the table can be very, very powerful, right? And that is taking it a step beyond. That's more than just putting together the data for your annual meeting. It's kind of bringing to life an experience for your LPs and your portfolio companies that is just very, very productive.
And I think to kind of bring things home and wrap up our third part of this framework with, you build these large events if that's what your goal is with your AGM, and you bring in business leaders, you bring in all these great people, but you create this summit environment, but there's still this piece of it, the investment monitoring, the reporting out to your LP base that might not be for that big broader audience. So you have to kind of, figure out a time and a place within your AGM to have a conversation on the investments piece. And there's ways you can do this. I think generally most people will probably just get, kind of a conference room and a PowerPoint deck and do a question and answer session and spend some time going through the funds, the metrics, what's really driving the portfolio. But the ones that I've seen do this really well is they'll take the time, craft a session where some of the CEOs are allowed to come in for certain parts, pitch about their company, how they're kind of contributing, what's next on the horizon from them, and connect performance to people. I've seen that work really, really well. I'm curious when you scale down, not doing some big, summit type thing, but you're just talking intimately with your LPs. Have you seen some of the investment conversations delivered really well?
This is a show not telling opportunity, right?
Mm.
So we can even do another session on just like the investment data that needs to be conveyed. But I think this is more show not tell, meaning, how do you like why is an LP investing into your fund on the investment side? Because they think those opportunities are going to work, right? And so the show piece is like actually showing that your technology works, your investments work. And I think that could be, if you're investing into robots, like bring a robot to the annual meeting. If you're, in investing into technology, like maybe encourage your CEOs when they're presenting to actually like show whatever they're investing into or whatever they built that it works, right? Like that can be very, very powerful. And again, I think I wouldn't lose sight of LPs, everyone, right, are emotional beings. So you're making a data driven decision, but you got to connect that data to I think, something happening or something more tangible. And I think, the bringing to life your portfolio companies, while it sounds strange under the investment bucket, I actually think is a way to drive home like and make
Mm.
investing more tangible and real and practical, and impactful, right? A lot of people invest in a venture because they want to see change, right? And I think the show not tell application here can really kind of show your LPs, show your attendees that stuff is working, and you're not just talking about it.
And I've been on field trips where we've gone and seen 3D printed neighborhoods. We've seen autonomous diggers, electric vehicle factories. And so depending on your location, and even if you're bringing your LPs to a destination, there's probably a nexus of startups that you can do kind of one of these in-person roadshows as you're talking about how the portfolio is doing and introducing it to your LPs. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So I guess now we should switch over to our Did You See section. So winner, there's been a lot of consternation the last couple of weeks on Twitter about one of these initiatives coming out of California. And I'm curious, I'm sure you've seen, did you see that they've, at least for the time being, stopped the enforcement, stopped the, reporting requirement for VC funds to report to California for a lot of these DEI and ESG kind of recording initiatives that they wanted to do. So all of that stuff has been put on pause for right now, and we're awaiting further guidance.
Yeah, I think this was creating um, some stress for both emerging and established managers, right?
Mm.
Where there are going to be additional reporting requirements and additional expenses on the back of this law. So yeah, for the time being, it's been pushed out, and we'll see how it gets adjusted over the months and coming years. But again, I think it was, for folks, especially emerging managers that don't have huge compliance teams, this was going to be something that
Mm.
they're focused on, the diversity element, but also something that would have been onerous on the back office side. So I think there's a little bit of relief because it reduces the office load. But again, I'm still seeing kind of focuses on sustainability and impact and diversity. So I don't think it changes the focus around diversity, but I do think it kind of changes the back office time and commitment that it would have taken if this law went into effect, and
Yeah,
expense.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's the mechanism was what people I think were frustrated about, and hopefully they'll go back to the drawing board and figure out a better way to collect this data that they need.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
all.
next week we'll return to our series on fundraising. And so we'll see you back next week.